Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's conversation, we will be tackling some of the most common and misinformed statements about immigration. You've probably heard things like, why don't they get in line? Or my family did it the right way. Why don't they? But the truth is, our immigration system is flawed. It is outdated, confusing, and often inaccessible for the people who need it the most. To help us break all of this down, I am joined by Abogada Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, an immigration attorney, advocate, and founder of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law in Austin, Texas. Since 2015, Kate and her team have helped thousands of families to find stability and hope through legal pathways, all while centering dignity and justice in their work. Kate's law firm is currently offering free consultations to anyone in any state and is also launching a nonprofit in which you will hear about in this episode as well towards the end. Today, we are talking about why people immigrate, what the actual pathways of citizenship look like, and why some assumptions, like marrying a US citizen to fix your status, isn't as simple as it sounds. Let's welcome Kate.
Hi there.
Hola, Kate. Thank you so much for being here with us today to talk about this very important information.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. It is critical, I think, that people have a full understanding of what the immigration system actually looks like because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
There is. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the common questions that came in from our audience. Can you share with us what are some common reasons why people truly immigrate?
Well, I mean, the main reason that people immigrate is because they want a better life for themselves and their children to come. You know, people come here because they are ambitious and they want safety, they want security, they want prosperity. The United States has been known as a country that offers all of those things. And so that's the main reason that people are drawn here. And that's a wonderful thing. And also, there's often another layer where people are being pushed out of their own country, and that could be for economic reasons or safety reasons. And so one portion of immigrants that come here are also what we would consider refugees or asylum seekers, but that's just a percentage.
People often say, my family did it the right way. Why don't they? You know, it's easy. There is a path to citizenship. Just apply. Can you talk to us about the actual pathways to citizenship and help us understand why the system is outdated? I saw a video. I think the first video that introduced me to you was that video where you were just in the car slamming down facts after facts. I loved it. So yeah, if you could talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, and this is something I do a lot of presentations, and I'll even go and talk to people who are, on the fence or don't really understand immigration. And oftentimes I'll go and talk to people and they'll talk about how their grandparents or their parents did it and why can't these people do it the way that they did it. And I think what people really don't understand is that the shift in policies and the application of policies where, if somebody's grandparents just showed up at the border, maybe somebody who's Cuban showed up at the border, they would have just been allowed right into the country under former policies, or people from other nations. It was really, really, really different decades ago, that pretty much all you had to do was get here and it was easy to immigrate. And those policies are different. And now we have a system that primarily prioritizes family-based immigration. So we have some employment immigration where businesses will petition for people. The bulk of immigration is through family-based petitions, but those cases are very backlogged. So, the Mexican brother of a U.S. citizen is currently waiting 25 years for their turn in line, and many, many people die while they're waiting in line. So that system needs an overhaul. And then we have some sort of humanitarian cases like asylum or diversity visas. But all of these systems are outdated and not supportive of the actual needs of the economy of this country. I'm not talking about the amount of people who want to immigrate to the United States. I don't think we could devise a system that would work, if that were the perspective. But in terms of what does this nation need? We are a nation that needs immigration, right? We have an aging baby boomer population and we need people to be able to come here legally, but the system hasn't been overhauled in more than 4 decades. And so good, hardworking people who are trying to do it the right way either can't come here or they end up waiting in line for decades and it's not a feasible system. It truly is a broken and unmanageable system. But what has to happen is Congress has to get together and agree on an immigration overhaul. And as long as conservative politicians are trying to convince everyone that immigration is a dirty word, they can't then turn around and pass immigration legislation because that would make them hypocrites. And so it's this rhetoric that convinces people to be afraid of immigrants that blocks Republicans from passing immigration reform. And it's really hurting this country.
So then what are the current forms and pathways towards citizenship currently?
So I like to think of it as, first of all, I'll say it's a very complicated system. It's hard to distill, but the way that I simplify it is I think of immigration in basically four general buckets. Okay, so one bucket would be through employment, where a business petitions for an employee. In general, this is the most strict and difficult way to get legal status. So for example, if somebody has worked without permission or they've been in the United States without permission, they generally can't get status through employment. So that's one bucket. And then this other bucket is through family. So US citizens and permanent residents are the two types of people who can petition for relatives. And permanent residents can only petition for spouses and unmarried children, whereas US citizens can petition for parents, siblings, spouses, and children, whether they're married or single. And then within that category, there's all sorts of rules about whether somebody can get status in the United States or whether they have to go out and process through the consulate and how long the wait time is. That in and of itself is a complicated area of immigration. Then there's a lot of humanitarian cases. This is something that I do a lot of. And this is for people who have suffered some type of crime or violence or mistreatment in the past. So this could look like somebody who's been a victim of abuse in the workplace or domestic violence, or otherwise has been a crime victim and they've made a police report. That's like the U visa, the T visa, VAWA. And these programs are more generous and flexible in general. So you can get waivers for unlawful entries or former, previous arrest history. So these are often ways that people who are undocumented and don't have employment or family options to get legal status. And then the fourth category for people in the United States is deportation defense. And that's when someone finds themselves in court. There's lots of defenses available to be able to stay here legally. So that's sort of generally how I would distill a very complex immigration system.
Yeah. And I know that for everybody that's watching, it's really important to do a consultation with an immigration attorney because everyone's case is different from based off of what I'm learning. There isn't a blanket one fits all situation. Like Kate mentioned in the beginning, some people are waiting decades for a pathway for them.
That is my number one piece of advice right now to the immigrant community, is that each individual person needs their own consultation with a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, not a notario, because a notary public in the United States is not like a notario in Central America or South America. It's not a lawyer. So a lot of people will go to forms preparers or notarios, or they'll even talk to friends and family members. I met a guy, an engineer from Mexico, who came and qualified for asylum. But he told me, this was 10 years after he had entered, that when he got here, he talked to his mechanic and his butcher and had a conversation with each of them about the immigration system. And they told him he didn't qualify and he never filed for asylum. And now he lost his eligibility. And that to me was such a perfect example of really what I hear on a daily basis, which is that people assume or they get bad information and they don't go to a good source. And the best thing that people can do right now is to be informed about their own case. But another thing you can do in a consultation is figure out how to protect yourself. So you have a strategy and a safety plan. It's not just about, I get legal status and how much does it cost and how much time will it take? I mean, that's the big question. But then also in the meantime, what can I be doing to live safely here? Is a question that everybody should discuss with a lawyer. It's so important.
Thank you for that information. Yeah, I think there's so much and people are in such panic mode that this information is helpful because we know, well, in the psychological sense, that people can't really intake information when they're in that panic mode. So hopefully they can digest and take this advice if they haven't been connected to an immigration attorney. So going back to somewhat of the beginning, there's a belief that here in America that people come in for violence or fleeing crimes that they've committed in other countries. In your opinion, working with undocumented community, what do you know about this? What are the actual facts?
It's a lie. It's a lie that the American public has been sold by conservative politicians because fear is a powerful motivator, and it gets politicians elected and it controls the electorate. I'm an immigration lawyer in Texas. I've worked with over 10,000 people who have come into the southern border. And the vast majority of these people, number one, are fleeing the very violence that, for example, the Trump administration would have us believe they're bringing to the United States. These are people who are fleeing gang violence from Honduras. They're fleeing gang violence from Venezuela. They're coming here to get away from all of that. And also the studies have shown, many studies have shown that immigrants commit crime at a significantly lower rate than native-born citizens. So it's just not true. The truth is that in general, immigrants are hardworking, law-abiding people who are trying to just have a better life for themselves and do things the right way, and are many very, very proud of this country and living in this country. And so the reality that the Trump administration and politicians like him have sold to the American public, and the rhetoric that we're seeing around immigrants is so heartbreaking and damaging because it's just a lie. And the statistics show that.
I think the other misconception and something people frequently ask about, or say rather, is just marry an American, get married to them, and then you'll have your status. What can you tell us about that? What is the actual reality?
Well, it's not that simple. Not everybody who marries a citizen, first of all, is eligible for a green card, depending upon the history. If somebody has many entries and exits or certain criminal history, they wouldn't even be eligible. But if somebody entered without a visa and then they marry a citizen, they still have to go through the consular process, which can take a really long time. But ultimately, at the end of the day, often that can be a solution for someone who's undocumented, is if they fall in love with and marry a U.S. citizen, they could get a green card. What I would caution against is, of course, committing marriage fraud. And that is just having an agreement with someone to marry them when this marriage is not for love. I'm not saying that the marriage needs to be exactly traditional in the way that, everybody thinks of marriage necessarily, but it does need to be a marriage based on love. Because if it isn't, if it's just for immigration purposes, it could create civil and criminal penalties for both parties. Everybody could get fined. Everybody could get jailed. It's a really bad idea. So that's the caution that I would give when we're talking about marrying a U.S. citizen. But generally, falling in love with and marrying a U.S. citizen can be a solution to an immigration question.
Okay. Again, it'll depend on someone's history, background, and is it true that within this question that it can take decades, even if you marry someone with status?
No, the wait times for marriage cases are not as long. So marriage to a U.S. citizen doesn't have a priority date wait. So anyone who's considered an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, which is a spouse or a minor child or the parent, as long as the citizen is over 21, those are called immediate relatives. And there's no limit on those categories, meaning it just takes as long as the paperwork takes. There are limits on spouses of permanent residents, and that can fluctuate. So right now, the wait time, depending upon the country, it can change a little bit, but it's around 2 years for spouses of permanent residents. But that tends to be the fastest category of all of the categories.
I want to thank you so much for your time informing us, educating us on these misconceptions. We know that there are many more, but for now we are keeping it at this. Kate, where can people find you? Can you tell us about your firm?
Sure. I started my firm 10 years ago, and the whole goal of my firm is to give people excellent legal representation, but also really dignified customer service. We're really focused on proactive communication, keeping our clients informed and up to date. We're based in Austin, Texas, but we're a virtual firm and we can represent clients all over the 50 United States. So, and we can do virtual consultations. And right now, with everything that's going on, we are doing free consultations for folks. So if anybody listening to this hasn't yet had your immigration consultation and you need to know what you're eligible for and how to protect yourself, I do encourage you to reach out. We'd love to be able to help you strategize.
Do you know how long you'll be offering the free consultations for? Just because this episode's going to go on the podcast, and so I want to be sure that there's, a time frame.
Sure. The commitment is through the summer of 2025. And then hopefully by then everything will have calmed down and we can, go back to normalcy. But, as long as this insanity is happening, we're going to do what we can to give free legal advice to the community. We also have a nonprofit that we're launching. It's called El Bus Sin Fronteras. It's a big school bus that we're driving out and having immigration events where we're giving out advice. That's more localized, although I do want to expand it. So we're doing what we can to get the information out to the people.
It truly is all hands on deck in various areas. Yeah. And we definitely are greater in numbers. So it's really beautiful to see the community come together. Thank you for everything that you've been doing. I've been learning a lot through your page personally as well. And, it's become a resource for the undocumented folks that I also work with. I want to also share community. I don't know if you noticed or if you know, but Kate speaks Spanish. And so her videos are also in Spanish. And we're going to have this segment as well in Spanish. One last final question that just came into my ADHD brain is there a funnel that immigration attorneys get or have access to inform you of these ICE raids or of immigration news before it goes out to the public?
No, we don't get immigration news first necessarily, but I belong to the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And so we get daily updates from that organization about what's going on behind the scenes. I watch, the news just like everybody else does. But what I do, I tend to get stuff very quickly. And then what I do every day is get breaking news out immediately with a video in English and Spanish and try to also decipher what's happening. So it's, it's like, okay, here's the headline. And then what does this actually mean? So that's what I try to do with my content is help regular folk understand what's going on out there, because it's hard to keep up with litigation. Okay, the Fifth Circuit said this and the Supreme Court said that, and now it's down at the lower federal courts, and what is actually happening with DACA, that kind of thing. So that's what I try to do is just help people really understand what's happening on a daily basis.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for your time, Kate. Everybody, please support, follow, check out the show notes for all of Kate's information, and we will return with this segment in Spanish. Gracias, Kate. To find a therapist in your state, visit our directory at latinxtherapy.com. And I'm your host, a Guatemalan Mexican licensed marriage and family therapist.